Tonight, from New Orleans, President Obama says the government will not forget this city or its people 5 years after Katrina devastated the Gulf Coast.
It was a natural disaster, but also a man-made catastrophe.
I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, a force for change. The new top cop here battles a history of corruption inside the New Orleans police force. Rescue efforts are set to begin to save those trapped Chilean miners as the government seeks a plan to reach them sooner. And pitching in, the legendary music makers of New Orleans and how they helped rebuild this city.
Ever been New Orleans?
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening from New Orleans. August 29th, 2010. It has been a cloudy, rainy day here, but no match at all for what this city saw on August 29th, 5 years ago, when Hurricane Katrina rolled in with a vengeance. In the next 30 minutes, we'll take a look at New Orleans' past, present, and future. But we begin with the news of the day. President Obama ended his vacation this Sunday and came here to New Orleans to pay his respects and make some promises. Here's senior White House correspondent Bill Plant.
Fresh from their vacation on Martha's Vineyard, the Obama family's first stop was for lunch.
I'm going to try this alligator sausage.
Like most of the city, this popular restaurant was underwater after Katrina roared through. At historically black Xavier University, another successful rebound story, Mr. Obama hailed the city's renaissance, but admitted New Orleans still has a long way to go.
There's still too many people unable to find work. And there's still too many New Orleans folks who haven't been able to come home. I wanted to come here and tell the people of this city directly. My administration is going to stand with you and fight alongside you until the job is done, until New Orleans is all the way back.
The president also touched on the latest Gulf disaster, promising to monitor BP until the damage from the oil spill is reversed. A CBS News poll shows that a large majority believes the government is not prepared to deal with another hurricane as powerful as Katrina. Visiting a public housing development later, the president met with Maud Smith. Rescued from her home in the projects by boat, Smith went to the Superdome and to Houston before returning home. The president promised today to finish building a new levee system for the city by next year and also to restore the wetlands damaged by Katrina and the oil spill. Historian Doug Brinkley says the administration's not moving quickly enough on the wetlands and the levee system.
We've got to figure out, due to replenishing the wetlands and improving the levee system, we have to continue doing this at a faster rate if we're going to actually save this city in the long run.
Something that will take a long time indeed. For the president, though, this visit today was not just about the anniversary of Katrina. It was an opportunity to show what his administration has done compared to the spectacular failure of government 5 years ago. Russ?
Now the president heads back to Washington and back to work.
Vacation's over.
Okay, Bill Plant, thank you very much. Of course, Hurricane Katrina took a huge toll, taking the lives of more than 1,800 people, leaving 80% of New Orleans underwater and costing $135 billion in damage to homes, businesses, and infrastructure. But today, New Orleans celebrated its survival, as we hear from Mark Strassman.
Just as Katrina tried to bury New Orleans, people here tried to bury Katrina, ceremonially. In dozens of ceremonies this weekend, Katrina's survivors remembered Katrina's dead and their own true grit. Katrina was the near death of a major city. Americans elsewhere watched spellbound and outraged. The desperation.
And they will not give us nothing.
They're shooting you for water, they're raping you.
Move, bro.
The martial law.
Hey, stupid, drop it.
The air-sea rescues. For days, thousands of people, scared and scarred, were cut off from hope itself. Joyce Quint is the face of this city's never say die spirit. On Katrina's anniversary weekend, she finally got her house back, rebuilt by volunteers.
This is my hallway. A tub, a bathtub.
She's earned a good, long soak. For almost 5 years, this was home, a FEMA trailer on her front lawn.
And I'm forever grateful that I can get back in my house today. This is my friends forever.
That gratitude and resilience also marked this march through the city's lower 9th Ward. But 3/4 of the homes here were never rebuilt. 100,000 people who fled this city have never come back. And almost 1,000 families here still live in FEMA trailers.
These are people who own homes. They made it. You know, in America, it's hard to own a home. And if they're not back, what about folks who were less savvy?
In a changed city, Joyce Gwint represents the march of progress, day by day.
Yeah, now I have a house. Oh my.
Goodbye to Katrina.
Despite this mock funeral, it'll be years before New Orleans truly buries the ghosts of Katrina. Then again, by now, some people here are sick of even talking about Katrina. Their attitude, move on. But for most people here, getting past Katrina is a lot easier than getting over it. Russ?
Mark Strassman, thank you very much. Just last week, the U.S. Justice Department announced it is investigating charges that New Orleans police were ordered to shoot to kill looters in the aftermath of Katrina. It is the latest in a long line of accusations against the police force here. But the city has a new leader who has pledged to clean it up.
If we follow the rules and we tell the truth, we can work through almost anything. But
Renal Surpass has been on the job for just 4 months.
Congratulations.
In May, this 30-year career officer was sworn in as New Orleans' new police chief. Do you feel the pressure?
I feel the pressure to ensure that we never make the same mistakes.
He spent 20 years on the force here, was the city's deputy chief before leaving for the Washington State Police in 2001, and later 6 years as the top cop in Nashville.
I believe in policing. I think it's the most noble profession on the planet.
The New Orleans Police Department is reeling from allegations of murder, conspiracy, and civil rights violations in the chaotic days following Hurricane Katrina. When the storm hit, dozens of police abandoned their posts. CBS News cameras caught others apparently looting stores. More than 500 officers were fired or disciplined for their actions.
My child is never coming back. Never, ever.
Sherelle Johnson's son, 17-year-old James Brissett, seen here in the only photo to survive the storm, was shot 6 times by police while crossing the Danziger Bridge 5 days after the storm. Police claimed self-defense. 5 officers have pleaded guilty to covering up the shooting. 4 others have been indicted and could receive the death penalty if convicted.
Everything that happened in Danziger that's admitted in the court is an insult to the community.
But efforts are being made to clean up the force. 18 current and former officers are under federal indictment. The Justice Department has launched at least 8 separate investigations and has stepped in to overhaul the entire police force. Something Surpass says the city needs.
I think there's no question that the New Orleans experience points that out. No question that New Orleans was a city that needed this desperately.
Even before Katrina, New Orleans was one of the most violent cities in America. Today, the city's murder rate is down from its post-Katrina record, but New Orleans still ranks as the nation's murder capital. Crimes like theft and burglary are down 10%, and police recruitment is up, bringing the force back to near pre-Katrina levels.
How realistic is it that you and your crew can turn this around?
Oh, I think it's absolutely a done deal.
Chief Surpass has an aggressive 65-point plan to improve the department, opening up meetings to the public, appointing a civilian to head the Public Integrity Unit for the first time, creating a community outreach program, and introducing a zero-tolerance code of conduct.
But if you lie, we're going to fire you. If you fail to report misconduct, we're going to fire you.
Surpass says there's still a long way to go, but he's not second-guessing his decision to come home.
I am convinced that going home was the right thing for me, my family, my children, and the families and children of the city of New Orleans. I mean, I'm here to make a difference, and that's what I do every day.
We want to tell you about 3 storms in the Atlantic that are not yet as dangerous as Katrina. Hurricane Danielle weakened to a Category 1, but Earl grew into a full-fledged hurricane today. Fiona is still forming behind them. The predicted storm track would bring Earl to the East Coast this week, where high tides and rip currents have already arrived. Overseas, 2 more U.S. service members were killed today in bombings in Afghanistan, raising the U.S. death toll for the weekend to 7. 30 insurgents wearing American uniforms were killed in attacks yesterday on 2 bases in Khost province. It was 1 week ago today that we learned 33 men trapped in a gold and copper mine in Chile since August 5th were alive. Rescuers are making final preparations to begin drilling an escape shaft. Seth Doan has more.
Tomorrow, workers hope to start grinding through this part of Chile's Atacama Desert to begin drilling the main rescue tunnel. It'll be 26 inches wide and bore nearly 2,300 feet down to where the miners are trapped. Engineers are also now discussing a plan B, possibly another rescue tunnel, to reach the miners faster. Still, officials say rescue could be 3 months away. So to fight boredom, rescuers are sending down games and even MP3 players. When a camera was lowered Thursday to check on the miners, they seemed in good spirits.
This clear euphoric reaction is really transient. It's not going to last.
Psychiatrist Jeffrey Lieberman says the worry is what happens if the rescue drags on.
There needs to be a steady stream of communication with the surface to provide them some anchor in reality.
Help coping below ground may come from lessons learned high above it. NASA is sending experts to Chile tomorrow.
NASA's had a long experience in dealing with isolated environments.
While spiritual support came today from the Pope himself. Near the drill site, the vigils have not stopped. Most feel all they can do is pray. Seth Doan, CBS News, New York.
And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the community at ground zero for Katrina still has a long way to go, but we found seeds of hope. While New Orleans got most of the attention for the destruction caused by Hurricane Katrina, the storm actually roared ashore first at Plaquemines Parish, nearly wiping that Louisiana community off the map. Tragically, the first place hit has been the last to be rebuilt, as Michelle Miller learned.
When the surge stopped and the winds waned, Peggy Martin's home and the garden she spent a lifetime cultivating were gone.
But the inside was chaos. But it was totally, it looked like Hiroshima.
Katrina made landfall in Lower Plaquemines Parish, accessible mostly by ferry and 65 miles south of New Orleans. 3 people died, 2 of them Martin's 80-year-old parents.
They found them in the front yard over here, both about 50 yards apart.
Before Katrina, about 15,000 people lived on the parish's east and south ends. Today, it's about 3,500. Some low-lying communities look like ghost towns. Nearly 700 families are still living in mobile homes and FEMA trailers. Oysterman Gary Bartholomew lost his home and boat. He didn't return to the East Bank fishing village of Point of La Hache for 3 years and says little has been done.
This community is still devastated.
The bulk of the more than $600 million in federal recovery money has gone to the more populated north section of the parish, leaving those in the lower section feeling neglected.
Do they have schools?
No.
Do they have courthouses?
No. We'll be primed to double in size.
Parish President Billy Nungesser says he also feels the frustration.
I understand, they want to see more things back down here. It's going to take a long time.
In Plaquemines, rebuilding its fragile infrastructure is taking longer than elsewhere. New Orleans' levee system is a year away from being ready. Levees like this one in South Plaquemines Parish are 5 years behind. And this year, the BP oil spill again stalled the economic lifeline of the parish, shutting down once bustling marinas. Byron Incalade, president of Louisiana's Oysterman Association, believes the community will survive.
This is our home, but when you have nowhere else to go, you have no other choice but to buckle down and get it done.
There are signs of progress. A handful of public buildings have opened. Churches are being rebuilt. And the only restaurant, the Black Velvet Oyster Bar in the Lower Parish, which was completely destroyed, is open. For Peggy Martin, the devastating loss of family and home came to be symbolized in the death of her prized rose bush. It had survived a month underwater, but was destroyed by bulldozers cleaning up debris. or so she thought.
What is this here? Those are just weeds.
This?
It's alive!
A small sign of life in a place looking for hope. Michelle Miller, CBS News, Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana.
Here in the South, it has been a sweltering summer, but it's the Northeast that's been setting heat records. A new study shows 28 cities and towns from Caribou, Maine to New York City to Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia set record high average temperatures from March through August. And we'll be back. Two states held primaries yesterday. Here in Louisiana, Republican Senator David Vitter easily won his party's nomination. And in West Virginia, Democrats picked Governor Joe Manchin in the race to fill the Senate seat held by the late Senator Robert Byrd. Republicans chose businessman John Racy. In a controversial move, the Los Angeles Times today published its own rankings of 6,000 elementary school teachers. The teachers are ranked according to their effectiveness in raising students' test scores. The paper used raw data obtained from the Los Angeles School District. In downtown Phoenix, a sudden rainstorm triggered a massive chain reaction car crash. Almost 70 vehicles collided on slippery Interstate 10. 7 people were injured, none seriously. And just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, music. They call it the language of New Orleans, how it's helped revive the city. And welcome back to New Orleans. Most of the actual reconstruction of this town has been accomplished by carpenters, plumbers, and masons. Of course, other workers have pitched in as well. Musicians have poured their talent and energy into reviving the city's spirit.
5 years ago today, New Orleans jazz legend Kermit Ruffins was in Houston, Texas. It took him 4 months to get back home.
What was that time like for you personally?
Oh,
Katrina?
man, horrible. Couldn't wait to get home, just to play for the people.
So, on this 5th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, he's doing just that.
If you ever been to New Orleans, it's the hottest city you've ever seen. The one good thing came out of Katrina is that the world got a chance to see and hear New Orleans music.
And while some areas devastated by Katrina are still suffering,
that's where the levees broke.
like Kermit's lower 9th Ward neighborhood and most of the area east of New Orleans, musicians have helped revitalize the spirit and economy of the city. Last year, more than 7 million people visited New Orleans and spent more than $4 billion. That's up from 2006, which only saw 4 million tourists spending less than $3 billion.
You're from England? They're from England, and they came for the best jazz. Give them a hand, y'all. They all the way from England up in here, man.
And they are coming to clubs like Irvin Mayfield's. This Grammy Award-winning musician is a cultural ambassador for New Orleans.
Is New Orleans back?
New Orleans has absorbed Hurricane Katrina. It's a part of us.
Irvin lost a part of himself in the storm. His father was killed. He says he now has a greater appreciation for the city.
I have a tremendous level of gratitude for a city that's given me so much. So if I can give back 1% of what the city has given me, I felt like I would have done something.
We're in the heart of the Treme. This is my first bar.
The Treme is a legendary neighborhood where musicians past and present gather.
Man, it's such a pleasure running into you here.
We ran into Lloyd Price, who wrote the 1950s hit, Lottie Miss Claudie.
You wrote Lottie, 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 Miss Claudie.
Yeah.
How would you describe the fraternity of musicians here in New Orleans?
I think it's the greatest ever. I don't think there's nobody as close as musicians, as the musicians here in this town.
Generations of musicians that are now ensuring the deep tradition of New Orleans music won't fade away.
What made you so confident that New Orleans would come back?
I didn't have a doubt that people were going to be rushing back down here to move back and be back home. Drop me off in New Orleans. Drop me off
that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Russ Mitchell from the balcony of the Royal Sonesta Hotel in New Orleans. Harry Smith will anchor the Evening News tomorrow. Good night.
On television, online, and on the go, CBS News, the most powerful reporting anywhere.